Welcome to the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast for this inaugural Future Face-Off Friday, where I'm going to square off against some of the sickest puppies that NHL fan bases have to offer. Expert prospect analysts will join me weekly to make their case as to why their favorite team has a brighter future than Utah, while I'll be the one here defending the good name of our dear Mammoth. Today, we're going to start with the Ottawa Senators, represented by none other than Rocco Zappia, host of one of the best hockey prospect podcasts out there, the Puck Bunker. Let's welcome to the show Rocco Zappia, who on spring break in 2004 in Daytona Beach, Florida, once won a magnum bottle of Jose Cuervo tequila by breaking the record of 27 minutes on the mechanical bull at Senor Frogs. Welcome to the show, Rocco.
Thank you for having me. And honestly, that's why I had to do this podcast seated. Things just have not been the same ever since, unfortunately. But I thought I had buried that memory in the past. But thank you for re-traumatizing me once again there. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was my revenge for Boycer. Yeah, that was Boycer's revenge on the intro, and various skeletons in closets that may or may not have actually occurred being revealed at the beginning of every episode. Yes, so if you're not familiar with the Puck Bunker podcast, definitely check that out and see Rocco's unique intros. Yes. So Rocco, you want to start out telling people about your podcast, where they can find it, what all you guys have got cooking over there?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I do like to start the odd rumor or two about my co-host, most of which not true, but only most. We're at the Puck Bunker. You can follow us on YouTube, and we're on Twitter. I'm at Scout Rocco. Darren is at Puck Bunker Boyce, and the main page is at Puck Bunker. We do NHL prospect coverage. So we did last year was our first season. We had a ton of fun with it, so we decided to keep it going. And deep dives into prospects, the upcoming draft class. We've got 2 episodes out this year on some of the top players available, including Gavin McKenna. So check that out. I'm looking forward to the Hlinka. That's when scouting season really starts, but that's what we're about over there.
Yes, the Hlinka, both a really fun tournament and one that's definitely difficult to find in the States. I generally end up having to pay for some obscure streaming service and come out of pocket $30 or something to watch that thing. So I still haven't gotten around to figure out how I'm going to take it in, but I think it starts Monday, the Hlinka?
Starts on Monday. Yeah, it starts on Monday. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are the round robin games, and Friday, Saturday are the semifinals and the medal games.
It's definitely a fun tournament. So Utah fans, figure out how to watch that thing. I'll post in our Discord when I figure out how I'm going to stream it, and maybe I'll give you my credentials as well, folks, so that you can get in there for free. We'll see what we can get away with
we got,
on that.
I'll plug one thing real quick, because we got a pretty exciting episode coming. Post Hlinka, Brock Otten from McKean's is going to join us for a Hlinka wrap-up episode. So we'll be talking about all the players who stood out and who looks good heading into the start of the season. So that'll be a fun one. Probably that'll be out the day after the finals.
I've been a Brock Otten fan for years, since his OHL prospects blog actually looked modern.
He's great. He's one of the best guys in the whole industry, and he's one of those guys he's not too big for anybody. He's happy to talk hockey with anybody, no matter if you're someone in the industry or if you're nobody yet. Really, really nice guy.
He's awesome. He still goes on hfboards.com and plugs his stuff and interacts with people, which is saying something, because that place is quite the landscape for a nice guy like Brock. So Brock's the man. So definitely check out Brock Otten on the Puck Bunker. Boys, you'll learn a lot about what happened at the Hlinka and what to expect for the upcoming NHL entry draft, where hopefully both the Utah Mammoth and Ottawa Senators will be picking very, very late in the draft, much later than they're typically accustomed to. So both of these teams have had some struggles as of late. Ottawa's kind of righted the ship and turned things around a little bit quicker than Utah/Arizona had. So they're a little bit further along the development path, I think, Rocco, with making the playoffs last year even. I was looking at, the respective rebuilds, right? And, Coyotes last made the playoffs in 1920, 2019, 2020, not 1900. So it does feel like it's been 100 years. But yeah, actually, they qualified in the bubble. They beat the Predators in a best of 5, and then they got absolutely pantsed by the Colorado Avalanche in one of the most embarrassing playoff performances I've ever seen. Nathan McKinnon just really took their lunch money. It was brutal. But they were there. They made it, technically. Meanwhile, Ottawa was putting up a pathetic 62 points that year. The year before it was 64. The year before that it was 67. So their tank started a little bit sooner than the Arizona tank. Both teams did endure a pretty dark period there. And now both are headed in the right direction with Ottawa in the playoffs last year. So what, for somebody who also is a fan of a team who hasn't had a whole lot of success in the recent past, what's it like cheering for a team that actually qualifies for the playoffs, Rocco?
It was really, really nice to get back to that. I grew up a Sens fan in the era of the pizza line. And for those who don't know, the Sens arena used to have a promotion where if you scored 5 goals and you win, if the team scored 5 goals and you win, you get a free slice of pizza from one of the local pizza places. And halfway through the season, when we had Alfredson, Heatley, and Spezza, they actually had to change that promotion to 6 goals because they were giving away so much pizza when these guys were all, Heatley had back-to-back 50-goal seasons. So they got the nickname of the pizza line. So that's the Ottawa Senators that I'm used to. And that those teams never made it. They made it to one final. They never went all the way and won the cup. But that was a team that I could count on making the playoffs year in, year out and being a ton of fun to watch. And then you get into the last 7 years, really, since that improbable run where Erik Karlsson carried them to Game 7 double overtime against the Stanley Cup champion Penguins in the 3rd round. It's been bad since then. Since that kind of fluky backbreaker goal that they scored to lose that series and send Pittsburgh to the finals against Nashville, it's pretty much been all downhill since. You get to last year, and the build was finally over, and they finally had the right core pieces in place, and they finally had the right hockey operations structure, because there was a lot of things that went wrong in Ottawa before with the previous regime, and I'm the first one to harp on their ex-GM Pierre Dorion. I almost do it just as a gag at this point, just because I'm just so used to doing it. But it wasn't just him. It was the environment that he was in with and the previous owners passed away now, so I don't want to be mean or anything, but it was not the easiest environment to succeed in under Eugene Melnyk. So they were kind of hamstrung for a really long time. Now you bring in Michael Andlauer, and all of a sudden you have some optimism. Well, a year later, Steve Staios comes in, and this is a well-respected hockey person. He played the right way when he played. He played a long time in the league. He was an incredibly effective player, hardworking guy, someone that everyone respected. Made his way up through the OHL, did it the right way, and as in terms of management. And then he gets to Ottawa under Andlauer, and all of a sudden it feels like all the things that Pierre did well, which is in terms of Pierre Dorion and the Sens scouting staff did a phenomenal job under his tenure. That's one thing that they did really well. And the other thing they did really well is their contract situation. There's not too many bad deals that you see under Dorion's tenure. As much as I like to make fun of him, he left them in a great spot core-wise. That issue, his issue was filling out the core, which never really had success doing. And now last year you bring in a team that finally gets over the hump and is finally in the playoffs again. And I thought they played admirably against the Leafs. It's hard to lose to your closest rival, especially because we've never beat them in the playoffs. Speaking of getting pantsed, they used to pants us on an annual basis in the early 2000s in the playoffs there. So that was not fun, but equally that's a team that's been there before. They were trying to make a legitimate push to the cup in their minds. And they're supposed to win that series. And Ottawa, I was very happy with how their season turned out to make a very simple question very long for you there.
No, I appreciate it. And man, there are some parallels there. You talk about a dark period with poor leadership starting from ownership and headed right on down. We had some horrific ownership in Arizona with the Morello group, who is just infamous for all the wrong reasons. We were generally shepherded towards the end by John Shaika, who left in disgrace and made some very poor decisions, only to be replaced, thankfully, by Bill Armstrong, a guy who actually came up and did it the right way and is well respected in hockey management and scouting circles, to add an air of legitimacy, then to be swooped up and moved to Utah for a legitimate tech billionaire owner who's all in on investing in the club and the infrastructure and the fan experience and generating tons and tons of buzz. So I think in both cases, the clouds parted, the sun came out, and there's brighter days on the horizon. Funny you mentioned Dorian. Take a look at that. Yeah. So we had Bergevin after the Dvorak trade got axed. Then the OEL for Dylan Gunther trade there with the Canucks, he gets axed. And then we've got Dorian, of course, giving Chychrun a shot that didn't work out in a deal that gave us Daniil Boot. I don't think that the Sergachev trade's definitely going to result in the ouster of Tampa's GM, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe we'll switch that graphic to Buffalo there. Yeah.
Maybe that might be an appropriate next graphic there. I think Tampa Bay's got a pretty good thing going.
Yes. As much as we really like Sergachev, I think they did pretty okay on that trade. We'll see what happens with Geekie and with Moser, but they did also get McDonough back as a result of the freed up cap space there. So I think, this is the inaugural version of what we're doing on these Friday face-offs, these future face-offs here. I wanted to really start by just kind of checking in on where you think the Senators are at with their top 10 prospects. I will cover who I believe are Utah's top 10 prospects. We can kind of debate about that a little bit, and then we'll roll in the older players and do a 23U comparison and see who we think has the brighter future, in 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years down the line, right? So why don't you kick us off, Rocco, and tell us who you think is Ottawa's number one prospect?
Ottawa's number one prospect is their first rounder from 2024, Carter Yakimchuk, a massive right-handed defenseman with a ton of tools. And I'm going to keep that word handy, tools, because it's something that you're going to hear me kind of talk about a lot when it comes to the Sens prospects and really their draft strategy as a whole. So Carter Yakimchuk would be number one, and he projects ideally as a two-way force. He has a tremendous point shot. He has extremely silky hands for a defenseman of that size. You don't really see defensemen that big that have hands the way he does. And he plays a very physical game. His issues where they might be are maybe in terms of a little bit of pace. You'd like the feet to be a little lighter and maybe the reads to be a little more consistent. But if he pans out, there's a pile of upside with this kid in terms of being a two-way force, a la Brent Burns or a la kind of Dion Phaneuf early in his career before the mobility caught up with him.
Yeah, I agree. I watched Carter Yakimchuk, I don't know, a couple dozen times in his draft year probably, because he was right in that range where Arizona, eventually Utah would be picking. We ultimately went with Tej Ginla, but Yakimchuk was definitely one of my favorites in the draft. The kid is a defenseman, but he dangles like a skill forward. It's really incredible to watch. His straight line speed and acceleration isn't the best, but he is so damn slippery, and he is just a son of a bitch to play against. I made the comparison. I made a weird NHL comp for him. I kind of said he was like Corey Perry if Corey Perry was a defenseman, right? The elite shot, the after the whistle shenanigans, the way that every team is just distracted by wanting to rip his head off, and the just the shit-eating grin on his face as he's doing it. Yeah,
he's greasy. He's greasy in the best possible way, and I firmly believe still, like, yes, you have to have your skill guys, and that's fine, but you still can't win a Stanley Cup without some grease balls out there. And Florida has a whole team full of grease balls, and they just won 2 in a row. So I'll take that kind of thing. Like, it's It's the old adage, you'd rather try to rein in a stallion than motivate a donkey. So I'll take guys with a little snarl, and yeah, again, there needs to be a little more discipline, a little more consistency in terms of picking his spots, I think, for when to go for the big hit, for example, because he can take himself out of the play trying to blow a guy up at times. But those are things you can work on, and this is still a young player, and again, ton of tools, and I'm pretty excited to see him alongside some of our more stable veteran defensemen in a year or two.
Yeah, and he's an interesting case, that we could compare to Tisha Ginla. He was on the board for Utah. They opted for the winger, which was a surprise to me. I expected them to go with Dickinson or Yakimchuk or Perek, or any of the defensemen who are Zeev Buyum, potentially. I kind of figured they were going to go D, but they surprised us and went winger. I predicted Tisha Ginla would be the pick. I think I was the one guy who did that for Utah. But on paper, I was kind of expecting him to go for positional need. Yakimchuk was one of the older players in that class, and Tej was one of the younger players in that class. So a year later, it's interesting because now, in a way, that extra year of development was lost to Tisha Ginla due to the double hip surgery. So here we are a year later, and they're practically the same age in terms of hockey years because that extra year that Tej would have had to develop was lost. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, Yakimchuk's had another year of development. So I feel like the edge that was given to Tej on birth date was kind of lost over time. But I don't have Tej number one on my list. It was very, very close for me. I went ahead and gave the edge to Caleb Desnoyers simply because of the positional factor of Desnoyers being a center. The Tisha Ginla center experiment in Kelowna prior to being shut down for surgery wasn't going so well. He had moved back to wing before he ended up being shut down for the season. I don't know if that was injury related or if he just wasn't a good fit for the position, but he's looking more like a future winger than a future center to me. And Caleb Desnoyers has got center written all over him all day. He was over 60% on the dot, despite the wrist injuries that moved him over to the wing for a significant period of time. So Caleb Desnoyers, in terms of not having as significant of injury history as Tisha Ginla, and Caleb Desnoyers in terms of being a sure shot NHL center, puts him number one on my list. I think when I was on the puck bunker ahead of the draft, Rocco, we talked about potential Utah picks. I think I had Caleb Desnoyers circled on my list, and I believe you guys did as well. I know that you've been big Desnoyers supporters all throughout his draft here. What are your thoughts on Desnoyers, and what are your thoughts on Desnoyers versus Yakimchuk?
Caleb Desnoyers is the best prospect in this group, and it's not even particularly close, I don't think. I think there's a lot more debate between Iginla and Yakimchuk, which is maybe a debate that we could have that would make some sense. Desnoyers is, look, I'm the world's biggest Iginla fan. We'll get into that, but Desnoyers has it all, man. I mean, this is a sure of a bet as exists, and me and my co-host Darren, we both felt that he was massively overlooked by most people all year. We had been touting him as a top 3 pick and a slam dunk top 5 pick, which ended up really being the case. I mean, 4th. So he hadn't gotten that recognition on most lists. A lot of places question his offensive upside, but what we saw was a tall, skinny kid who has incredible details, exceptional offensive vision and hockey sense, and a ton of room to fill out his frame. So I found it almost laughable when I saw, oh, well, there's questions about his upside. I'm like, guys, this guy's 6'2", 170 pounds, and he's handling guys in the Memorial Cup. He's handling them, and he's got broken wrists. He can't even tape the knob of his own stick or take a face off, but he's out there playing in the Memorial Cup and looking good. And we're questioning his upside, and I found that hilarious. He gets overlooked because he plays in the Quebec League, which for those who are in Arizona, like, don't know, the CHL has 3 leagues, and the Quebec League is unfairly criticized as the kind of the ugly step sibling. of the bunch. It's deemed to be not as strong as Ontario and the Western League, which is true and false. The depth isn't there, and the bottom teams are much weaker. But the top end of the league, like they win the Memorial Cup more than their fair share coming out of the Quebec League. And the top teams are just as good as the top Ontario and WHL teams, and the top prospects can be just as good. And Dane Wyatt just got overlooked. Like, he plays out in Moncton, New Brunswick. I'm from New Brunswick, so I can chirp New Brunswick because this is like where he plays is like an hour from where I was born. And no one's going out to New Brunswick. Total population of the whole province is 800,000 or 1 million people. Like, no one's going out there when they're going to watch the OHL and the WHL. So they get underlooked. But as it turned out, NHL teams don't underlook him because they have scouts that go out there. And he was a top 5 pick, and rightfully so. You guys got at worst you're looking at an excellent 55-point second line center if things don't go well. If things do well, you could be looking at a point per game, a Patrice Bergeron, a Jonathan Toews, someone like this that does not grow on trees. I think they absolutely made the right pick where they took him at 4th overall. Like, you guys got to be ecstatic about having this guy in the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more with your analysis of the Quebec League there. Some of the top players in the NHL. I mean, I think 3 of the 4 top scorers or something like that this year were QMJHL's players. That statistic doesn't sound right now that I say it out loud. A bunch of the guys in the top 10, at least a few of them were from the Quebec League. You've got Kucherov, you've got McKinnon, you've got Crosby, you've got more who are in the Quebec League. They win the Memorial Cup more than the other 2 CHL leagues over the last 5 or 10 or 15 years as well, or at least as much. So completely agree with that. And Moncton, being a bit remote, does make it a harder stop for fans and scouts to check out. But it's a very well-run organization. They produce a lot of NHL talent. They have a lot of resources. The owner is well regarded as somebody who's willing to spend and provide a good development track for prospects there. So I think that Desnoyers is in good hands should he remain in Moncton. It's possible he goes the NCAA route. I think that it's getting a bit late in the day for him to make that kind of decision. So I suspect he's probably headed back to the Q. I don't know if you've heard anything on that front, Rocco.
No rumors to report in that sense. I would like to see him stay in the CHL one more season. I think what a lot of CHL players are going to realize that are making the jump to the NCAA is there may not be the same quality ice time and opportunity that they're getting. You're not playing the same amount of games, and if you're only playing half the games, and if you're only playing 2/3 of the minutes that you're used to, that may not be the best thing for your development. It may. The NCAA is great. I'm not trying to knock it. I'm just saying that this whole rush to go there may be a little bit premature. I still feel at the end of the day that the CHL will be the best place for 17, 18, and 19-year-old players. And in your 20-year-old season, that's when I think it may be more appropriate for, look, you've got your McKennas that are exceptional players and just better than everybody else who can go do it. You got a guy like Keaton Verhoff who's 6'4", developed, he can go handle it. Not everyone's going to be for it, and I think there's arguments for both sides, but I'd like to see Desnoyers back in Moncton for one more year.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's a really good program. If he was in a program that was a little less highly regarded and had a little less track record of success, I might be leaning towards the NCAA, especially because he is such a skinny kid and could use some time in the gym. But he's got a lot that he can still prove at this level. And I'm always a fan of over baking guys. And I think to your point, we probably will at some point see kids kind of decommit or walk off or join the CHL midseason. I don't know that this crazy trend of everyone rushing to the NCAA is going to be long lasting. This feels a bit like a bubble that might burst to some extent, and it will lean more towards what you described, in my opinion, which is older players making the transition once they've kind of outgrown the CHL to some extent. So I think we haven't quite hit the equilibrium on the whole new world when it comes to CHL to NCAA, but I think when it levels out, we'll all be pretty comfortable with the direction that all shapes into with the development track. I think ultimately it'll be a good thing for NHL fans and NHL teams. May not be the best thing in the world for certain junior A clubs or the USHL clubs or some other folks a little bit earlier on in the development path, but I think it'll be a stronger product for producing hockey talent overall. So shout out Kevin Thacker, the QMJHL scout for the Utah Mammoth, who I believe lives in the Maritimes, so he had the leg up on people and made sure that he was pounding the table for Desnoyers, and the team stood up and took notice and brought the boy home. So that's great to see. Rocco, I listened to you on the Sick podcast all year leading up to the Yakimchuk Iginla draft. And I know that you were big on Iginla at that point. He was a riser. He had a lot of helium late in his draft year as he really started piling up the goals. You were in on him early. You guys were the first ones I saw to start ranking him inside of the top 10, where most people had him later in the first. He was even in the early second on a lot of lists when the year started. So that inspired me to start watching a lot of Kelowna games. And I definitely saw what you guys were talking about and was blown away with him as I started to follow him very closely throughout the draft year. So Tisha Ginla's number 2 on my list. Who's number 2 on your list for the Senators?
Most people might be expecting me to trot out Logan Hensler's name, but I actually have him third, and I have a young goaltender by the name of Levi Merilainen at number 2 on our prospect rankings, still Calder eligible by virtue of playing 12 games last year. And he only played 12 games last year, but my goodness, Ottawa is not in the playoffs without those 12 games. He was something to the effect of 8-3-1. I might be off here by one there, but about eight wins in 12 games. Lights out, absolutely stole a couple games from them, and he's a guy in his drafter. So me and my all my buddies, we got a pretty good Sens group chat going, and when he got drafted, we couldn't find anything about this guy, right? And we started nicknaming him the Myth just within our little circle. And he's a guy that's just gotten a little bit better every year. And now all of a sudden you see him on practically every ranking of top 10 goalies under 25 in the league. He's right up there as good as any, really. I think this guy could be like a sure thing kind of top end goalie in the league. I don't think we're maybe not looking at a Andre Vasilevsky type, but there's only 7 or 8 goalies really that you can count on for 55, 60 starts. And I think when he gets to his time, he could be one of them. Extremely excited to have him in the system behind Allmark. It gives Ottawa a ton of safety and a ton of options at the goaltender position. If one of them gets hurt, you still have a guy that's capable of carrying the load. Goalies are a fickle bunch, so it's pretty reassuring to have that guy there, and he should be our backup full time this year.
And he's about to be 23. And that's when you can start actually kind of counting on goalies a little bit in terms of like what they're going to be. And this guy is a perfect example. I was actually just having this conversation in our Discord today with a fan who thought that I should have Michael Robel rated a little bit more highly on my list. And I said, I love the pick. I'm glad he's in the system. But at his age, so much has to continue to go right for goalies, right? Every team's just got 2 of them. So he's got to have the opportunity. The timing's got to be right. You have to be able to wait long-term for him. You're not necessarily going to keep a spot open for him. So a lot of times blue chip goalie prospects end up being successful for teams that did not draft them, right? And a lot of times when you look at the top goalies who are playing for the teams that did draft them, they tend to be a little bit later picks, right? Because the team was able to make the timing work. And I think Merilainen's a perfect example of that. He got picked in the 3rd round, and diehard prospect watching Sens fans were like, who the hell is this guy? And I'm sure you weren't feeling super reassured when he went and played for the Kingston Frontenacs after that and didn't have very good numbers on a pretty good team. And at some point, he turned it around as a professional, I guess, in the AHL or the East Coast League, right? These goalies, they take a while. And now you've got a guy who's about to turn 23, I guess next week, maybe. Happy birthday to Levy. He's going to be 23, and now he's putting up great numbers and helping carry a team to the playoffs because he is finally fully cooked in a way that it's going to take Michael Robel another 2 or 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5, before he's at this Levy Merilainen point. So that's why I think makes sense that you would be able to rank him this highly on your list. Even though for me, Michael Robel, who I think is a great goalie prospect, I don't have him ranked until 7th on my list. Even though his prospect stock is probably higher than Merilainen's ever was. He just has such a long road to go still.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is nice. And you mentioned the one thing I'll say about his time in Kingston, be wary a little bit. OHL goalie stats are tricky because that can be a very high scoring league with a lot of shootout games in the sense of run and gun sort of thing. So you don't always see goalies put up strong numbers in the OHL, but it wasn't his best season, but obviously he's found his groove here.
And us old Coyotes fans will recall telling ourselves that about Mark Byzantine. Turned out not to be the case. He just
fair enough.
It's Junior. He'll be all right. No. Thanks for that pick, boys. All right. So Tija Ginla is my number 2. Merilainen is yours. I think things get pretty interesting here with our number 3. You mentioned that yours was Logan Hensler. What do you want to tell us about Hensler?
Hensler, and I mean this in like the best way. He was the most boring possible pick they could have taken this year, and that's exactly what they needed. Because we don't have a first round pick in 2026, they could not afford to miss. The fact that Hensler was available to them where he was, I thought was quite shocking, given the premium placed on mobile right-handed defensemen who can move the puck. There's not a lot of flash to Hensler's game, and I'm perfectly okay with that. The Sens have their big horses. What they need is a guy that they know can go play 500-600 games for them during their window of contention, and I think that's what they got in Hensler. He was one of the best skating defensemen, one of the best skating players in that entire draft last year. He looked better and better against NCAA competition as the year went on. I was not a big fan of him early in the year. He came into the year with a lot of hype, which I always find funny because it's just like the guys that get noticed when they're younger. But like a lot of times these guys come in with so much hype who don't play the style of game that warrants a ton of fanfare. Like people thought he had a disappointing season. Well, he's not going to be a Cale Makar point producing like guy. You're looking for a steady Eddie. If everything goes well, like maybe you want you're looking at maybe a Noah Hannafin type of guy where you can get 22 minutes of worry-free hockey out of him, and you're really excited about that. And he'll be able to play in their top 4 for hopefully for a long time. And I was thrilled with the pick. He would have been the pick for me at 23, where they took him. So no surprise, I'm a big Bill Zonin fan, who they could have had if they didn't trade down those 2 spots. But wing was not necessarily the position of need for them. So I was thrilled with that pick. And maybe he's not the most exciting ton of offensive upside guy, but that's fine. They have like I said, they have their horses, and this is a guy that fits in, and he can be a piece of the puzzle. And once you get 20 of those, you get to lift a trophy. So. Right.
Absolutely. And Hensler's a guy who, again, he's probably too hyped coming into the year. Same thing for me. I'd watch him play and I'm like, why is this guy so hyped? And I would see him at, the University of Wisconsin, and then again at the World Juniors. But then you got to kind of stop and tell yourself, like, the fact that he's even in Division I hockey right now is impressive. The fact that he's even on the roster for the World Junior team is extremely impressive. You know what I mean? So like, whether or not he's blowing you away in those performances is one thing. But the fact that he's even putting himself in those positions, I mean, the kid is still 17 years old. Or no, he's not. He's about to turn 19. My mistake. Anyway, still very impressive to even be in those kinds of positions. And you watch him play and it's like, okay, he's a smooth player. He's very mobile. He gets the puck up the ice. He can defend the rush. He does what you want a big right-handed defenseman to do. and exactly the kind of thing you want to have on your roster at the pro level. So it makes perfect sense. Now, my number 3 ranked player for the Utah Mammoth is pretty different from Logan Hensler in a lot of ways. And I've got Daniil Boot rated at number 3, which I think surprised some of our fans in the Discord as well, who figured that was Dmitry Simashev's spot to lose. I watched Daniil Boot quite a bit. I watched most of the MHL games he played in his draft year and all of the MHL playoff games he's ever played. And he's somebody who, playing on the same team as Dmitry Simashev and Loco in the MHL, is someone I was always a little bit more impressed with Daniil Boot than I was with Dmitry Simashev every time I watched him play. So when you watch these guys play 25 plus times and you like one better than the other almost every time, how do you not rank them higher on the list, right? Even if that's not the way it worked out on draft day with the premium placed on the big defenseman. Boot is got crazy ceiling, crazy flash to his game. He's an exciting player in ways that Hensler isn't as much. Hensler and Simashev, I do think, have quite a bit in common, but Daniil Boot is somebody who's very, very, very different from Logan Hensler in that he's a giant winger who has tons of skill and can beat you with his offense and can just beat you up. He's just a nasty bully of a player. I didn't watch him a whole lot in the KHL. He did just win a Gagarin Cup with Dmitry Simashev as Yaroslava Lokomotiv won the championship in the KHL this year. So both of them did play small roles on a cup-winning team in the KHL. But in the MHL in juniors, Daniil Boot was a guy you had to look out for. He was not a friendly fella. He was just a nasty son of a gun. He'd pin you against the boards, take your arms out, pin your stick right against the boards, and just help himself to your puck. He would just pounce on guys. He was merciless, just bear down on him. That puck was going to be his. He would not be denied. And at his size, with his skating and his hands, more than often than not, that led to really good things on the score sheet. So what do you make of Daniil Boot, and what do you make of where he would stack up against Logan Hensler?
I like your assessment of him, and I agree with pretty much everything you said there. He is, if Logan Hensler is the safety net, Daniil Boot is the opposite. He could be anything. He could be a boat, right? You don't know. And that's kind of exciting. A little scary too, because you don't necessarily know what you're getting. But with his size, I think there's a solid chance if the offense doesn't hit, he can develop a pretty solid B game in terms of a guy that'll get hard on the forecheck and kind of crush your lights out and still be able to chip in, maybe similar to a Lawson Krause type of role. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you're getting a little more offense than that. I think that's obviously the goal. Lawson Krause, I would call him an elite third line winger. You're hoping for a little more than that from Boot, but I think that's probably the floor there as well. But a big guy like that, who's mean, who's got some hands and skill to his game. I mean, it's a pretty exciting player, and good on them for taking those two guys high when everyone's scared of taking Russians. So,
yeah, and it actually helps out, right? Because look it up. It went according to plan. They developed together in the MHL. They got called up together to the KHL. They've been longtime friends and teammates, and now they both signed their entry-level contracts and are headed over to Utah this summer together as a pair. And I think getting both of them was a smart maneuver in that way. It kind of mitigated some of the risk or fear that they might spend extra time in Russia, getting them in a situation where they can be comfortable knowing that they're going to be together as they continue to develop. Now, Simashev is somebody who I do think has a lot of similarities to Hensler, right? In that there's the size, skating, smoothness combo, the sort of defensive ability combo. I'm not sure what the offensive upside is on Simashev. Again, I didn't watch a ton of KHL games, but in the MHL, for a big, strong kid, I was surprised at the lack of velocity on his shot. He had a bit of a muffin, and the lack of credible threat from the shot made him more of a pass first player. And, smart goalies and smart defensemen knew that. Smart wingers knew that he was probably going to look to pass or pull a pass shot, which I think mitigated his overall offensive ability, especially on the power play, where he wasn't really a credible shooting threat. He can skate like the wind. It's crazy. He can carry the puck really, really well and dangle through guys and take breathtaking end-to-end zone entries. It's just kind of what happens with the puck once he's done it, and how often that becomes a goal is what I would question. But his ability to step up on guys, his gap control, his ability to mitigate zone entries, his puck retrievals, the presence that he is in front of the net in terms of just his sheer size and strength, all really, really good stuff that, to me, point to him being a phenomenal defensive defenseman with every tool that you would want a defensive defenseman to have to play that shutdown role. We'll see about the offense, I guess. And there's some degree of that with Logan Hensler too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know that Hensler maybe has the same physicality there. Hensler I don't think is not gonna throw maybe punishing body checks, but there are a lot of similarities there for sure. I think with Simishev, you guys are looking for the hope needs to be, or the expectation should be, a high-end shutdown defenseman. If he's got that kind of size, and like you said, he doesn't have necessarily the shot, and he doesn't have maybe the offensive creativity to finish off these nice rushes and these nice skating plays that he does. But what that sounds like to me is a very good transitional defender who can retrieve the puck, maybe make a move. And now you're creating an odd man scenario, and then you move the puck and you let the skilled offensive players finish that off. There's a lot of time for that kind of player. I mean, that could be a very, very valuable piece. And like you said, he's a very high end defender who has elite size and very, very good feet. So if you get a guy who's going to play 24 mean minutes a night and can move the puck up the ice to your forwards, I think the casual fan needs to be excited about that and kind of look past the numbers, and any sort of offense you get over and above 25 points needs to be seen as a bit of a bonus.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that'll be something interesting for Utah Mammoth fans who are maybe a little bit new to watching a prospect pool develop and break in, that this guy could be seen as an elite prospect and a top prospect for the team, not really put up any points in his first year. And somehow we're not going to be disappointed at all by that. And we're still going to be quite happy with what we get, odds are. So that'll be a fun experience for people to see kind of the different facets of the game that we can get excited about as these players develop and crack the roster. But Hensler was not your fourth rated guy.
I had him
third rated guy.
Yeah.
Yes. And now somehow I've gotten off track, and oh yeah, that's right. Simishev was my fourth rated guy. Who did you have fourth for Ottawa?
So I have a prospect by the name of Blake Montgomery, who Memorial Cup champion Blake Montgomery. And this is a guy who was drafted a couple of years ago by Ottawa in the fourth round. He was actually passed over in his first go through the draft. He was not taken, and then Ottawa took him his second time through the draft in the fourth round. And I mentioned toolsy would become a word. This is an extremely toolsy kid. He's a massive 6'3", 6'4", over 200 pounds. He can fly. He can fly up and down the wing, and he can score, and he can hit. And he is exactly the player I want on my somewhere in my future middle six, whether that's second line or third line. I would say if everything goes well for him, if everything goes perfect, he could be a second liner. I think we're looking at a guy who could be an excellent third line winger who can kind of maybe play up and down in a pinch for you and kind of cover any scenario that you need. Again, very, very toolsy, but he's a guy that kind of developed a little bit later, and he's taken massive steps in his development each of the past couple seasons. And he's been a bit of a suitcase going from team to team, league to league, and he's going to be in another new team, another new league next year. But we actually interviewed him on the Puck Bunker, and great kid, by the way, like the kind of guy that you would want in the room, happy-go-lucky, off the ice, just laughing all the time. Kind of guy that every guy would like and want to be around. But one thing he noted was, like, now that he's been in London, he goes, the biggest thing he learned in London, and that's what the point he was making is he's learned something at each of these different leagues, and he's taken the best of what that league and that team had to offer and applied it to the next scenario. And he said one thing about London now that he's been there. He absolutely hates losing, and that was just music to my ears. That made me smile. That made me smile from ear to ear when he said that. So that's a guy I think that gets it, and I think he's realized the last couple of years just how high end his tools are and how far he can get, and he has a legitimate chance to be a long-term everyday NHL player. And I think at this point, that is the expectation of the organization, that we're looking at a guy who can fit into this team down the road, and someone that I think they're pretty excited about. And not a guy that's going to be 50 goals. He's not going to score 100 points, but what he's going to do is help you win. And I think there's 15 to 20 goal upside there. I think there's 40 to 50 point upside there. And I think there's a lot of speed and a lot of intangibles that are hard to quantify, but that every team needs to win. I'm pretty excited about where Montgomery fits into this team moving forward in the next few years.
Yeah, and he was impressive for the London Knights, certainly. Where's he going to play next year?
He's in Wisconsin, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So
you put
he's
me on
going to
the
play
spot.
NCAA. Is he playing NCAA?
NCAA, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I was just wondering if he was turning pro. Yeah, you started talking about him, and I watched him in the Mem Cup and the OHL playoffs, and there's
Wisconsin.
there you go. Wisconsin. Okay, so he's gonna be there with Hensler. Great. Yeah. And he reminded me a little bit. It's not the perfect comp, but of a new Ottawa Senator, Fabian Zetterlund, a little bit. Like maybe there's a little bit of comparison there in terms of getting up and down the wing quick and being a bigger guy. I know Zetterlund's more of a cigarette machine than he is a hulking winger. He's a bit shorter and thicker, but just that that 15-20 goal, good, honest work boots effort, up and down the boards, get to the net kind of mentality.
Yeah, I don't disagree there in terms of where they might fit in the lineup in terms of their versatility. Obviously, Zetterlund's a shorter player. That's a funny cigarette machine. I like that one. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. A guy that has some offensive tools can hopefully chip in 20 goals for you and play where you need him to play. But more so than that, do the little things right and dig in the corners and win his battles and hit guys and like he said himself, just hate to lose. So.
And as I look a little further down your list, there's a couple of guys here that before we get to him, but the fifth guy on my list is Maverick Lamora, number 5, who is a really entertaining player who's had a lot of injury issues over the years, including last season, but has managed to develop quite well despite it. He seems to be filling out. He was really impressive in the NHL last year. I watched quite a few Tucson Roadrunner games, both on television and in person, and he was actually somebody who I thought was even more impressive in the NHL than he was in the AHL, in fact. He's a friend of the show, Clean Hits, former guest. So if you haven't seen that episode, go watch it. Maverick Lamora on our side is my number 5. But I see a guy a little bit later on your list, Gabriel Eliasson, who I got to watch a lot of while I was keeping an eye on Cole Baudouin, who's incidentally my number 6 rated prospect on our list. And I see some similarities between Eliasson and Maverick Lamora. Did you want to maybe talk a little bit about what you see in Eliasson in his game?
Yeah, so I've got Eliasson ranked 7th, I guess, on our prospect list. Now, look, Ottawa's list really drops off after number 5. So there's it's shallow because, like you talked about, they didn't have a ton of picks the last few years. But Gabriel Eliasson in the 2024 draft, he was the singular meanest player in that whole draft class, bar none. And he really, I talk about reining in a stallion versus motivating a donkey, and this guy needs some serious reining in. He's borderline Looney Tunes out there when he's playing. He hits to hurt. He takes himself out of position to hit, but he excels at what he does. He's extremely raw, but he's 6'7". He's a half decent skater, and he's a craziest guy on the ice, and you have to know where he is. And regardless of what people say about him and that pick, because that was not a popular pick in Ottawa.
I liked it.
The team got a lot of flack for that one. It may not have been the guy that I took. I mean, there's a couple guys there, but I understand what they were doing with that pick. You get a chance to get the guy who's notoriously the craziest guy in the draft, who's a 6'7" defenseman with decent feet. I get it. And they're trying to build a pretty big, pretty mean back end. And he's a guy that if he sorts himself out in terms of the mental aspects of the game, and he can kind of find a lane to stay in and play within his strengths, I think he could become a pretty feared player. Conversely, if he maintains the same style of play that he did in Barrie this year, he's never going to play in the league. So he has a lot of things to iron out, a lot of rawness to his game, but equally, what he does have, the things that he does have, cannot be taught, and the things that he lacks can, in theory, be taught and be fixed. So, I don't think we're ever looking at a first pair defenseman, but you could be looking at a guy that every player in the league knows when he's on the ice, and that would be pretty good from a second rounder for me.
Yes, absolutely. And when you make Sean Aitchison look disciplined, you've got an interesting on ice persona. Yeah,
and that's it, right? So it can't be all blind rage from him all the time. Maybe we need to set him up with the Karate Kid and channel that a little bit. But he's got some potential as a feared physical shutdown defender.
And Maverick Lamoureux himself got in a whole heck of a lot of penalty trouble in his brief stint in the NHL as well. He played 15 games for us last season and had 42 PIMs. So he was a guy who found himself in the box quite a bit as well. We had him on the show. He talked about trying to rein that in. And to his credit, he did in the AHL. He still had 48 penalty minutes in 42 games, but it wasn't a 3-to-1 PIM to game ratio like it was in the NHL. So I think it was kind of adjusting to the pace, and there was not just crazy physical play that led to those penalties, but some impediment and stick infractions and stuff, guys beating him wide or going through his triangle or between the legs kind of thing, and him having to recover. But, that ferocity was kept in check a little bit more effectively in the AHL. So hopefully Eliasson can take a similar path to rounding his game out and smoothing off those edges. Or as Dean Lombardi said when he was general manager of the LA Kings, it's better to tame a tiger than paint stripes on a pussycat. So just a different version of your adage with the stallion and the donkey. Yeah. So, that's I think an interesting comparison there, Eliasson and Lamoureux. I've got Cole Baudouin, Michael Robel, Artem Duda, who I was immensely impressed with in Tucson this season. Really a standout player down there. Max Shanichka, who was really impressive late in the season in the WHL after coming over from Czechia, someone who I think stood out in the playoffs in that similar vein of Eliasson and Lamoureux. Some rhyme with Simishev there too, and being a big shutdown defenseman. And then rounding out my top 10 is Thomas Lavoie from the QMJHL, who was a first overall pick in that league, struggled a bit in his draft year, fell to the third round after being a projected first rounder, and has since really climbed back and proven a lot and been very, very productive. Again, friend of the show, Thomas Lavoie. Check out that episode. Sweet kid. Cole Baudouin also on the show as well for anyone who hasn't seen those. You want to kind of briefly run through the rest of your top 10, Rocco?
Yeah. So at number 5, we got Stephen Halliday, who projects as maybe a bottom 6 center with some skill to his game. He was a late bloomer, but again, big kid with some tools that's taken the longer road to development, and now he's ready to maybe be the first or second call up for them this year. I think he'll get some games. Javon Moore at number 6, he was a pick in the same draft class as Montgomery. Very similar profile, actually. Big 6'4" winger with some scoring ability and a little bit of jam to his game, who was a bit of a late bloomer as well. So that's a guy that I like. We had Eliasson at 7, Jorian Donovan, son of Sean Donovan, at number 8. Two-way defenseman who can really, really skate and can get himself into some decision-making inconsistencies. But he'll have another year in Belleville, and there's potential there. He's got the mobility to maybe play some games down the road. You got goalie Riedler at number 9, big, massive Swedish kid who's playing in the NCAA. Didn't play much last year, but posted good numbers. 6'6" goalie. I mean, look, the Sens prospect pool is fairly thin, so I wanted to put another goalie in there. So he's probably our top guy, although maybe Beckman that they drafted this year, but he's a 6'2", a little small for my liking. Jabril Toure is the only guy on this list at number 10. He's the only guy on this list who was actually undrafted by the team. He was a free agent signing. Again, toolsy guy, big defenseman who can move and has some snarl. He was signed a couple years ago in the organization, played a year in the Coast, played great, moved up last year, played in the American League, played great. Looks to have a pretty secure top 4 role there for the whole season, and a guy that that I'm personally cheering for because I know he's a very good kid, very likable kid, and he's worked his ass off to get to where he is. So someone I wanted to give special mention to. Maybe he plays the Matt Paolo role down the line. Matt Paolo was also undrafted and broke into the league last year as a 26-year-old rookie, who now looks like a pretty reliable 6, 7, 8 defenseman. Which you do need in a championship winning playoff run. So I have hopes for Jabril Toure to one day play some games for the big club in Ottawa.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And speaking of that future success where you're going to need depth players like that, I think both teams are poised to be looking at deeper playoff runs before too long. Ottawa probably a little bit sooner. And the big part of that is going to be their under 23 core. This is my first time doing the future face-off, so I did not leave enough time for the under 23 debate, really. But I think we could touch on it briefly. You can see where right now Utah's top prospect depth is a little bit higher. The pool is kind of in a little bit of a different situation from Ottawa's. And you can see the reason why a little bit here when we start talking about our 23U group, because this is where Ottawa really runs away with it to some extent, because their guys have already arrived on the scene where Utah's are still kind of in progress. So for Utah, I've got Logan Cooley, Dylan Guenther, JJ Peterka, and then a bunch of guys who I had to feature on the prospect list already, who are maybe more maybes to actually be full-time NHLers this year in Daniil Boot, Dmitry Simashev, Maverick Lamara, and Artem Duda, rounding out my list of guys who have a real shot. But predominantly, this boils down to Cooley, Guenther, and Peterka, who's a pretty solid under 23 list, 23 and under list. All three of them had 60+ points last season at their age. Utah is one of the few teams to have that many players coming into the season with that level of production at that age. But when I look at your list for Ottawa, it feels like the Sens really pull ahead here. What can you tell us about Ottawa's 23 and under core, Rocco?
Yeah, no, and this will be the last year that I get away with this because Ottawa's look, the 2020 draft is probably the best draft they've ever had as a franchise, and these guys are 23 now. But it's Jake Sanderson and Tim Stützle. They are the two best players from that draft class. And, Lafreniere and Byfield were 1 and 2. But Stützle at 3 and Sanderson at 5, I think, have turned out. I think in a redraft, they go 1, 2, and flip a coin as to which order that is really. Levi Merilainen, who I talked about as well, from that same draft class, who looks to be a future starting goalie. Yakimchuk and Hensler are not quite ready yet, but I put them there because they're going to be big parts of the future. Ridley, Gregg, and Tyler Clevin have both already earned full-time roster spots, and they're a big piece of this moving forward. Clevin is that. Tyler Clevin is what a successful Eliasson or Lamara looks like down the road. Big, mean defenseman who can give you some really hard minutes and be no fun to play against. And I love his game. And Ridley Gregg is just maybe the devil incarnate, somewhere between Brendan Gallagher and Brad Marchand. He's got a lot of piss and vinegar in his game, and he knows how to piss people off in the best possible way. I love him. So that 2020 draft class props us up because these guys are at the older end of it. Guys that just missed for Ottawa is where it's really exciting because if you look at a 25 and under core, that's where it runs away because now I can add Brady Tkachuk at 25, Shane Pinto at 24, Dylan Cousins at 24, Zetterlund at 25, and Jordan Spence at 24. So 5 more guys who are all in team control for the long term. Plus the core I just mentioned, we're looking at 13 guys here who are going to be NHL players who are all within the same age range, who are all going to have the same or very similar prime. Logan Hensler, the youngest, at 18, and Brady Tkachuk at 25. You know, when Hensler's 25, Tkachuk will still be 32, still very much in his prime in terms of being able to carry your team to a cup. So the window, I think, in Ottawa, last year was their first taste of success. They got to the playoffs, and hey, you made it to the dance. Congratulations. Let's celebrate that. Let's not take anything away, because that was the goal last year. But now it's time where getting there is not good enough. And the expectation this year is to win a round or two and to challenge Toronto and Tampa and maybe Florida, at least make a series of it with them if you get the chance to play them in the playoffs. So, but Ottawa's window is very much open from this year. I'd say for the next 8 years, if they can keep this team together, this is one of the most exciting young teams in the league, and I'm thrilled to finally be able to say that after so long. They're in a great spot cap-wise. Again, credit to Pierre Dorion. He did leave them in a phenomenal financial situation. Now, part of that is Melnick's tight pockets, kind of, you know.
Yeah.
What was his negotiation great, or was his budget bad? Who knows? Maybe a bit of both. Either way, Sens are poised to have a ton of cap space moving forward, and hopefully keep these guys together and maybe even add to them. So I'm very excited. I know I'm cheating a little bit, including the 24 and 25-year-olds, but even just 23 and under was Sanderson, Stützle, Yakimchuk, Merline, Hensler, Gregg, and Clevin. I mean, goodness, there's not many franchises that would be able to swap out a better 23U group than that.
No, I totally agree. I think Utah is one that gives them a run for their money. I think when you do up the age a little bit, that's where it truly starts to run away, because just missing the cut for Utah is Barrett Hayton and Jack McBain, both valuable depth centers, you know, good potential third line shutdown, good two-way physical centers, but not the difference makers that Brady Tkachuk is when you add him in, and you know, even Dylan Cousins and Shane Pinto are maybe a little bit more in that category. But you know, adding in the Tkachuk is a big token for Ottawa in their favor. So yeah, I think both teams have bright futures. I think Utah's just a couple of years behind Ottawa, but it'll be exciting to see where the high water mark is for both. And hopefully someday it'll be a Stanley Cup final between the two. What do you say, Rocco?
Honestly, I would love that, and I'll make you a deal. If we ever get to the Cup finals, the team with home ice advantage is buying the tickets and hosting the other guy for Game 5s, and the other guy pays for his flights. Pays for the flights. Is that fair? We'll watch Game 5 together.
Fair. Yes. All right. Yep.
I love what Utah's done. I want to say that I'm actually been a huge fan. As someone who covers draft prospects, it seems that year in, year out, they draft guys that I like, and they take a lot of guys that are similar mold to the guys that Ottawa likes to pick. They like hardworking, hard-nosed forwards that have skill to go with it, and they like big mobile defensemen who can move the puck, and both franchises have that in common. Like you said, I was huge on it was October. I watched again for the first time, and he was ranked as a second rounder at that time. And I was, like you mentioned, I was working with Grant. I called Grant. I said, Grant, either I'm crazy or everybody else is crazy. He starts laughing. He goes, what do you mean? I said, TJ Ginla's a top 10 pick. He goes, okay, well, pump the brakes. I said, I'm not pumping anything. I'm like, I'm not seeing what there is to miss here. I'm like, he's about as surefire of a future 30 goal guy as I've seen. So I love that pick, and Desnoyers. And again, I'm a homer. I'm from New Brunswick, but equally, I've loved his game all year long. And then you just got three towers there: Simashev, Lammer on the back end, Daniel Butt. Like, I mean, you guys are drafting a team that's going to be hard to play against. And I think when you look at the NHL, you see the teams that are hard to play against tend to go further than the teams like the Torontos and the Carolinas that are built a bit more skill focused and point production focused and kind of analytic driven, kind of what you guys had before, you tried to have before. And look, if you're going to win, you have to want it more than the other guy, because when you get to the NHL, the worst player in the NHL is an obscenely good hockey player. The worst player that plays one game in the league next year is obscenely good at the sport of hockey. And when you get 23 guys against 23 guys that are all obscenely good at something, who wants it more and who's going to take it from the other guy? And I see Utah and Ottawa building teams full of guys who want it. Cole Baudouin, there's a great example of a guy who wants to win and wants it, and will beat a guy up in the corner for a loose puck. But that's what you need, and I love what they're doing. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And Ottawa's doing the same, right? They've got, I mean, you don't get harder to play against than Brady Tkachuk and Carter Yakimchuk, right? Then you start mixing in some Gabriel Eliasson, a lot of different guys there who can really mix it up and make it hard to play against. So yeah, the wager is good. Let's get this Stanley Cup final kicked off sooner rather than later. Anything to get me out of Phoenix in the summer. I'd much rather be in Ottawa. I'd much rather be in Salt Lake City. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, poor guy has to deal with year-round sunshine. We all feel so bad for you. You're gonna play 250 rounds next year if you feel like it. That's crazy. Things of my dreams.
Yeah, my 10-year-old is the avid golfer in the family, so he never misses a Saturday to get out there and play 18.
That's good though, because that's good though. That's the best though, because you need one kid to be an avid golfer. Then you can be, I'm just taking the kid golfing. I'm just being a good dad.
Father-son bonding time. That's it.
Exactly. That's it. So right on.
You can't take this away from me. August is the month that I really get to bitch about being in Arizona, and so you got to let us have it. Yeah.
Fair enough. It was 120 degrees yesterday. Craziness.
Yep. Absolutely. Hey, Rocco, thanks for coming on. Always love having a conversation with you. Bright futures ahead for both teams. Utah Mammoth fans, as we start ramping up draft season here, especially with the Hlinka, it's the official kickoff. Here we go. Make sure that you're tuning into the Puck Bunker. Follow those guys on X. Follow those guys on YouTube. They put out phenomenal draft content all year long, so you'll really be well read up on everything that is the 2026 NHL entry draft. All right, if there's nothing else to add, Rocco, I'll go ahead and play some music, and then I'll catch you after.
Hey, that's great. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.